The Galaxy Council was the most powerful group in the known universe. It had been around for thousands of years. It had members from over 200 planets. The Council controlled trade routes, made laws for entire star systems, and decided the fate of whole civilizations. No one questioned it. No one dared. The Council met inside a massive space station called the Eternal Throne. It floated at the very center of the galaxy, where the stars burned the brightest. And the station was so large that it had its own weather inside. Rain fell in its lower halls. Winds blew through its long corridors. Mountains of metal and glass rose in its inner chambers. It was a place built to remind everyone who walked through its doors that the Council was forever, and that they were nothing. The Council had 13 members. Each one came from a different race. There was Veldran, a tall blue creature with 6 arms and eyes that never blinked, and he was the oldest member and the most respected. There was Ossa, a small round being made almost entirely of light. She was sharp and quick and had never been wrong about anything in over 300 years. There was Groth, a massive stone-like creature whose voice made the floor shake when he spoke. And there were 10 others, each powerful and strange in their own way. They had seen everything. They had watched stars die and new ones are born. They had ended wars with a single order. And they had erased entire races that became too dangerous. They were proud of who they were and what they had built. Nothing surprised them anymore. Nothing scared them. They had seen too much for that. So when a report came in about a small blue planet on the outer edge of the galaxy, no one was worried. The planet was called Earth by the creatures who lived on it. It was tiny. Its sun was ordinary. Its people were soft, small beings with only 2 arms and 2 legs and no real natural weapons. They had no fangs long enough to matter, no claws to speak of, no thick armor on their skin. They bled easily. They broke easily. They were weak by every standard the Council used to judge a species. The report said these creatures called themselves humans. They had just started leaving their planet. They had built small, clumsy ships that moved slowly through space. Their fastest vessel took years just to reach the nearest star. Their weapons could barely scratch a basic Council scout ship. Their technology was hundreds of years behind almost every other known race in the galaxy. Veldran read the report slowly, and then set it down on the table. Humans, he said, as if tasting the word. They call themselves humans. They are nothing, Groth said. His voice rolled through the chamber like a slow wave of thunder. Small, soft, slow. They are not even worth putting in the records. They have potential, said a younger Council member named Auri. She was a pale green creature with wide, careful eyes. She studied new civilizations and had spent many years watching Earth from a distance. They are fast learners. They adapt to new things quickly. Their history on their own planet shows... Their history shows they fight each other constantly, Ossa interrupted. Her light pulsed with cold amusement. They cannot even agree among themselves. They start wars over small pieces of land. They burn their own cities. They are divided, angry, and primitive. Auri straightened up. Yes, they fight each other. But when they face something from the outside, they stop. They unite. Every time in their history when a common danger appeared, they came together. And they are very hard to kill. They live through things that would destroy other species. Heat, cold, sickness, hunger, pain. They survive all of it. And they do not stop. Even when they are clearly losing, they keep going. The chamber was quiet for a moment. And then Groth laughed. It was a deep grinding sound, like 2 giant rocks being crushed together. Once he started, others joined in. The laughter spread slowly through the great chamber of the Eternal Throne, growing louder as it passed from member to member. Even Veldran smiled, which was something that almost never happened. Hard to kill? Ossa said, her light flickering with sharp amusement. We have weapons that can crack a moon in half. We have ships that travel faster than light itself. We have technology 10,000 years ahead of theirs. And you are warning us about these soft little creatures who still use chemical rockets. I am not saying they are a danger right now, Ori said carefully, keeping her voice steady. I am saying they could become one, if we do nothing and let them grow, if we just ignore them while they learn and build and expand. Let them grow, Veldran said, his voice calm and final. They are no threat to us. They will likely destroy themselves before they ever leave their own star system. Their kind always does. They burn too hot. They want too much. They always collapse in the end. That was how the meeting ended. No action was taken. No ships were sent to watch Earth more closely. No warnings were sent to the humans. The council laughed, scoffed, and moved on to more important matters. Ori sat alone in the chamber long after the others had left. She stared at the star map on the wall. Earth glowed there as a tiny blue dot, almost too small to see among the millions of other stars. She had studied this planet for years. She had read every report, gone through every piece of data, watched every pattern in their history with careful eyes. She pulled up an old file on her screen. It was a record from long ago, before she had joined the council. A small group of humans, fewer than 300 of them, had been stranded on a frozen moon during a mining accident. Their rescue ships arrived 60 years later. Everyone expected to find only bones and old equipment. They found a living, working settlement. The humans had not just survived. They had built homes from the ice and rock around them. They had grown food in the freezing dark. They had made tools from almost nothing. Many had died in those 60 years, yes, but the ones who lived had become something harder, something quieter and more focused. They had stopped arguing about small things, and they only cared about what mattered. Ori closed the file slowly. She had tried to explain this to the council more than once. Humans did not merely survive their problems, they were shaped by them. Every hardship made them better at enduring. Every enemy made them sharper at fighting. Every loss made them more determined to never lose again. The council looked at humans and saw weakness. They saw small bodies and slow ships and simple weapons. And they saw creatures who bled and cried and died young. Auri saw something else. She saw a species that had been forged in fire from the very beginning. A species born on a dangerous planet full of things that wanted to eat them. A species that had clawed its way up from nothing, surviving ice ages, plagues, and disasters that should have ended them 100 times over. And still they were here, still growing, still pushing outward. She saved her private notes and locked the file. Someday, she thought, the council would remember this meeting. They would remember exactly how they had laughed. And on that day, there would be no laughter left in any of them. She looked at the little blue dot one more time. Then she turned off her screen and walked out of the empty chamber, her footsteps quiet in the long hall. Somewhere far away, on a small blue planet at the edge of everything, a species called humanity kept moving forward, knowing nothing about the council. Knowing nothing about the laughter, knowing nothing about the decision that had just been made about their fate. They just kept building. They kept learning. They kept reaching for the stars. That decision, to scoff, to laugh, to look away, would one day cost the council everything. Years passed after that meeting in the great hall of the Eternal Throne. The council forgot about Earth almost completely. They had wars to manage between other planets, trade routes to protect, and rebellions to crush in distant star systems. Earth was just a small footnote on a long list of primitive worlds that were not worth any serious attention. But Auri did not forget. She kept watching. She sent tiny drones to orbit Earth from a safe distance, invisible and completely silent. She collected data every single day. She watched as the humans slowly pushed further out from their planet. First to their moon, which they built a permanent station on, then to the red planet next door. and where they built underground cities that kept growing year by year. Then further out, past the giant gas planets at the edge of their solar system. Their ships got faster, their weapons got stronger, their numbers grew. 20 years after the council meeting, Ori submitted another report. The humans had developed a basic form of faster-than-light travel. It was rough and imprecise by the council's standards, but it worked. They had made contact with 2 other species in nearby star systems, both of them primitive and small, and had formed real working alliances with both of them. Their military had grown into something large and organized. They had built warships that were still far below council level, but far above where they had been. And something else had happened too. They had found 2 of Ari's old survey drones. They had pulled them out of orbit around one of their outer planets. They had studied them carefully, taken them completely apart, piece by piece, and then built working copies of the technology inside them. In less than 10 years, they had gone from not understanding the technology at all to producing their own versions of it. Ori brought all of this to the council. The reaction was almost exactly the same as before. "They found 2 drones," Groth said, crossing his thick stone arms. "We have lost thousands of drones across the centuries. It means nothing at all." "They copied the technology," Ori said, "in less than a decade." "Even if they copy everything we have," Veldran said, his voice perfectly calm, "they are still far behind. The gap is simply too large to close in any meaningful time." "That is only true for a normal species," Ori said. "Humans do not work like other species." She pulled up a projection in the center of the chamber. It showed a graph of human technological progress over the past century. The line went up sharply, almost straight up, and climbing faster with every passing decade. "Every species we have ever encountered took at least 1,000 years to move from basic space travel to advanced space travel. Humans did it in 80 years. Every species we know slows down as it grows larger and more complex. Humans speed up. The more they learn, the faster they learn. The more they fight, the better they fight." She let the graph hang in the air. "At the current rate," she said quietly, "they will reach our level of technology in roughly 300 years. The chamber was silent for a moment. Then Veldran waved one of his hands. 300 years is a very long time, Auri. Not for a species that does not give up." "You have been saying the same things for decades," Asa said, her light cool and flat. "Humans are special. Humans are dangerous. Humans are different from everyone else." She looked around the chamber. "And yet here we are. Nothing has happened. They have not attacked anyone. They have not caused any real trouble for any council member." "Not yet," Ari said. "Then we will wait until they do," Veldran said. He folded 2 of his hands together. "We do not punish a species for things they have not yet done. That is not how we operate. We are a council of law and reason, not fear." "By the time they actually do something," Ari said, "it may already be too late to stop them." "Then it will be too late," Osa replied simply. "Yeah, we have survived far worse things than a short-lived race with small ships and borrowed technology. If they ever become a real problem, we will deal with it then." Ori gathered her files and left. In the long corridor outside the chamber, she stopped walking. She stood still for a moment while the busy staff of the Eternal Throne moved all around her, carrying reports and heading to meetings and doing the daily work of running the galaxy. Nobody looked at her. Nobody noticed the expression on her face. She thought about the humans she had been watching for all these years. Not just the ships and the weapons, which were easy to measure. She thought about the other things, the harder things to put into a report. She had studied their language closely. They had a word, grudge. It meant they remembered being wronged. They remembered for a long time. They wrote it down so they would not forget. And when they eventually had the power to do something about it, they did not hesitate. She thought about what would happen when the humans found out the council had been watching them for decades without ever saying a word, without ever making contact, without ever offering help or friendship. She thought about another word she had learned from their old stories. Relentless. It meant to never stop moving towards something, to keep going past exhaustion, past pain, and past every reason a normal creature would quit. Their greatest heroes were never the strongest or the cleverest. They were always the ones who simply refused to stop. She walked to her private office and sat down. She did not write another report. There was no point. The council was done listening. But she began to prepare. Quietly and carefully, over the next few months, she started building a small shelter on a forgotten moon, far from any important planet. As she moved supplies there in small amounts over time, nothing large enough to raise any questions. She stored food, medicine, water, tools, and power cells. She built a list of the fastest escape routes out of council space. She prepared it all without telling anyone. She just watched and waited. The humans, meanwhile, kept growing and expanding, not knowing the council existed. They thought the galaxy was mostly empty, aside from their two small allies. And they had no idea that the most powerful organization in the known universe had looked at them, laughed out loud, and decided they were not worth thinking about. But then, on a cold night on Earth, in a small research station buried deep in the ice near the southern pole, a scientist named Yara Chen was going through old signal data when she found something strange. A repeated signal pattern, very faint, that had been bouncing around the outer edge of the solar system for years. She ran the data through her systems 3 times to make sure she was not making an error. She was not making an error. The signal was artificial. It was not from any human source, and the technology behind it was far, far beyond anything humans had built. Yara sat very still at her desk for a long time. The station hummed quietly around her. Outside, the frozen wind moved across the ice. She thought about what this meant. It meant something had been out there, watching them, for a long time. Something that had never spoken, never made contact, just watched quietly from the dark. She saved the data to 3 separate drives, picked up her communicator, and called her director. "I need you to come look at something," she said carefully. "And I think you need to bring the military scientists with you." Her director asked what she had found. "I think," Yara said slowly, "that someone has been watching us. And I think they decided a very long time ago that we were not worth talking to." She did not know how right she was. She did not know that the ones who had been watching her world had laughed at it. She did not yet know what that laughter would eventually cost them. But she would find out. They all would. The discovery changed everything on Earth. Yara Chen's finding was kept quiet at first. The data was handed up through government channels, from her director to the science board, from the science board to the military leadership, and from there to the leaders of the largest human nations. Within 3 months, a secret group had been formed. They called it simply the Watchers, because that is what they did. They watched the signal. They studied it. They traced it backward through space, following the faint trail it had left across decades of data. What they found was that the signal had been active for at least 60 years. 60 years of silent observation. Not a word. Not a greeting. Not a warning. Just watching, the way a hunter watches prey from the trees. The humans did not panic. That surprised many people who expected fear to take over. Instead, something older and quieter came over the people in those rooms. Something that had no single name but felt familiar. It was the same feeling a person gets when they realize they have been followed home in the dark. A cold, clear focus. They started working. And the military research teams pulled apart what little they had recovered from the 2 old drones years earlier and went back to work with new urgency. They now had a clear reason to push harder. Scientists who had been making slow progress suddenly found themselves with unlimited funding and full government support. Engineers worked around the clock in long, rotating shifts. And the two alien allies humanity had made were quietly brought into the conversation and asked if they had any knowledge of who might be watching. One of them, a cautious insect-like species called the Veth, went very still when they heard the description of the signal. Their elder spoke in a low, careful voice. "You have been noticed by the ones above," the elder said. "The Great Council. The ones who decide which species live and grow and which ones are left to fade." The human diplomat in the room asked what the council thought of humans. The Veth elder paused for a long time. "We do not know. We have never been considered important enough for them to speak to directly. We only know their name and their reach. We know that when they decide a species is a problem, that species disappears." The human diplomat nodded slowly. "Ah, and when they decide a species is not worth noticing?" The elder looked at them. "They watch, they wait, and they do nothing until they change their mind." That report reached every human government within a week. The fear came then, briefly. There were arguments and debates and late nights full of hard questions. Some leaders wanted to try to send a message to this council, to introduce themselves, to ask for peace before anything bad happened. Others said that 60 years of silent watching without any greeting was not the behavior of someone who wanted to be friends. They said the message had already been sent, and it was the silence itself. In the end, it was not the politicians who made the real decision. It was the engineers and the soldiers and the scientists who simply kept working. They did not wait for a political answer. They built. They trained. They prepared. 3 years after Yara's discovery, the first new warship came out of the deep space construction yard orbiting the moon. It was twice the size of anything humans had built before. Its hull was layered with materials copied and improved from the drone technology. Its weapon systems were completely redesigned. It moved faster than any human ship ever had. They called it the Defiance. More followed, one every few months, then one every few weeks. As the yards expanded, and new ones were built in orbit around Mars and the outer planets. The Veth watched this with wide, unreadable eyes and said little, but they quietly moved their own people to safer planets, further from human space. They had seen what humans did when they decided to get ready for something. On the Eternal Throne, the Council received its first real update on Earth in many years. A junior analyst had been monitoring the outer edges of the galaxy on routine duty when the sensor reports from that region caught his attention. He cross-checked the data twice and then took it straight to a senior officer. The senior officer looked at the report for a long time without speaking. Then she took it directly to the council chamber herself, which was something she had never done before in her career. Veldran read the report. He read it a second time. And then he set it down and looked across the long table at the other members. "The humans have found our observation drones," he said. "We knew this already," Groth said, not looking up. "No," Veldran said quietly. "Not 2 drones. They have found and recovered the signals from every drone we had in their system, all 14 of them. And they have been building." That made the room pay attention. The report was put on the central display for all to see, and it showed the human fleet in orbit, the warships, the construction yards, the troop transports being loaded in the dark between planets. It showed the weapons tests that had been conducted on the far side of their moon, with energy readings that were unexpectedly high. It showed the new shielding materials that had been developed by reverse engineering council technology, then improved upon. Asa's light flickered in a way it rarely did. They improved on the design." "They did," the analyst confirmed from the side of the room. "They found a flaw in the original shielding that our own engineers have apparently never corrected. Their version is about 30% stronger." Nobody laughed this time. "They know we have been watching them," Veldran said. It was not a question. "They know something has been watching them," the analyst said. "They do not yet know who." "But they are looking." Veldran was quiet for a long moment. The chamber was completely still. Then he turned to look at the place where Ori usually sat. Her chair was empty. She had not attended a council meeting in several months. No one had thought much of it at the time. "Where is Ori?" he asked. Nobody in the room knew. A search was ordered. It found nothing. Ori's quarters were empty. Her personal files had been wiped clean. But the only thing left behind was a single sentence written by hand on a piece of paper, left on her desk. It said, "I warned you. I am sorry I could not make you listen." Veldran read it and said nothing. He set the paper down carefully and looked at the star map on the wall. Earth's blue dot glowed in the outer edge of the galaxy, small and distant and busy with the sound of engines and hammers and people getting ready for something. "Call a full security session," he said. "We need to discuss what to do about the humans." He did not laugh this time. None of them did. Outside, in the deep black between stars, a small human scout ship moved quietly through space, its sensors running, its crew watching the dark with calm and patient eyes. They were looking for the source of the signal. They were getting very close. The council's security session lasted 3 full days. Arguments went back and forth across the chamber table. Some members wanted to reach out to the humans peacefully, to make formal contact and offer them a controlled place in the galactic order as a low-level member species. Others said the time for easy options was already gone. The humans were building warships, not welcome flags. They had found the observation drones and said nothing, sent no message, made no contact of their own. They were preparing quietly and seriously, and everyone in that room knew it. On the 3rd day, Groth stood up. And he said that the council had 2 choices: reach out to the humans with friendship, which might or might not work, and which came with the risk that the humans would simply use the contact to learn more about the council's location and defenses, or send a fleet to Earth right now, before the humans became any stronger, and bring the situation under control while they still could. Most of the council voted for the fleet. Not because they were afraid of the humans. They still did not truly believe the humans were a real danger. They voted for the fleet because it was clean and simple and final. The humans had grown too fast and too quietly, and the safest answer was to end the problem now before it had a chance to become a real one. Veldran did not vote either way. He sat at the head of the table and stared at the star map for a long time. He thought about Auri's empty chair. He thought about the paper she had left behind. He thought about everything she had said in this very room over the years, all the reports she had filed, all the data she had brought, all the warnings that had been brushed aside. He did not stop the vote. The fleet was assembled quietly and quickly, 40 ships, far more than enough to deal with any resistance the humans could offer. The fleet commander was a sharp, experienced officer named Drev, who had ended conflicts on a dozen planets and had never lost a single engagement. And he was given simple orders: approach Earth, give the humans one chance to stand down and submit to council authority, and if they refused, remove the threat completely. Drev studied the human fleet data during the journey. He read through every report that had ever been filed about Earth. He noted the weapons, the ships, the numbers. His own fleet was better equipped, better trained, and more experienced. He was not worried. He did notice one thing that gave him a small pause. The humans had divided their fleet into 3 separate groups, spread across their solar system. 2 groups were near the outer planets. One was near Earth itself. It was not the positioning of a species waiting to be told what to do. It was the positioning of something that expected a fight and had already planned for one. He noted it and moved on. They were still outmatched. It would not matter. What Drev did not know was that the human scout ship that had been searching for the source of the signal had found it 3 weeks earlier. It had not found the Eternal Throne itself, but it had followed the signal path to a relay station on the edge of Council space, and from there a careful analysis had given the humans a general location. They did not know exactly where the Council was, but they knew the direction. They knew the region of space. They also knew a fleet was coming. The Council's communication systems were old and built for security through complexity, not secrecy. The humans had been studying the drone technology for years, and one of the things they had quietly cracked 6 months earlier was a partial ability to read certain older signal types. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to understand the shape of military orders moving through Council channels. Yara Chen, who had found the original signal in the ice station and who now worked directly for the Watchers program, was the one who decoded the fragmentary message. She sat alone in her lab at 2 in the morning and read the decoded text 4 times to be sure. 40 ships heading for Earth. Estimated arrival in 11 days. She sent the alert and then sat back in her chair and breathed slowly. 11 days. The human response was immediate and completely calm. This was the thing about them that Auri had tried to describe so many times and could never quite put into words in a way that made the Council understand. When a normal species received news that a massive enemy fleet was coming to destroy their home, fear took over first. Panic, confusion, noise. The humans got quiet. The human fleet commanders met for 6 hours. By the end, they had a plan. Not a plan to surrender. Not a plan to hide, a plan to fight. And the human fleet was split further, not into 3 groups now, but 7. Each group had a specific role. 2 were decoys placed in visible positions to draw the Council fleet's attention. 2 were fast attack wings that would strike from the flanks the moment the Council fleet committed to a direction. 1 was a heavy assault group positioned directly in the path of approach, waiting to absorb the first attack and hold long enough for the others to move. 1 was a reserve, held completely out of sensor range behind the gas giant. And 1, the smallest and fastest group, was given special orders that were shared with only a handful of people. Their orders were not to fight. Their orders were to run, and to not stop until they found the Eternal Throne. Drev arrived at the edge of the human solar system on the 11th day, exactly on schedule. He sent the standard demand: stand down, power down all weapons, prepare for Council authority. And the answer came back quickly. No words, no negotiation. A human warship flew directly at the leading Council vessel and opened fire. Drev blinked, which was the closest he had come to being surprised in a very long time. He had expected hesitation. He had expected fear. He had expected exactly the kind of slow, uncertain response you got from a species that knew it was outmatched. He had not expected this. The battle for Earth's solar system lasted 9 hours. Drev's fleet was better in almost every way that should have mattered. Better ships, better weapons, longer range, more experience. But the humans fought in a way that was deeply uncomfortable to face. They did not pull back when they took damage. They did not protect themselves when it meant losing a tactical advantage. 2 human ships flew directly into the engine sections of Council vessels, fully crewed, at maximum speed. Not accidents, choices. But 3 Council ships were destroyed in the first hour. 6 more were badly damaged. Drev had expected to lose nothing. He pulled the fleet back to regroup, something he had not done in 40 years of combat. He looked at his casualty reports and then looked at the human fleet on the sensors, which had also taken serious damage and was still advancing toward him. They were still advancing. He sent a message back to the Eternal Throne. It said simply, "These are not what we expected." But by the time that message arrived, the small, fast human group with the special orders was already deep in Council space, running hard and dark with all lights off and all signals silent, heading toward the center of the galaxy, heading toward the Eternal Throne, heading home. The message from Drev arrived at the Eternal Throne at the worst possible time. The Veldran was in the middle of a routine session when the communication officer walked into the chamber, moving faster than anyone on that station ever walked, and handed him the report without a word. Veldran read it. Then he read the second report that came in right behind it, from the long-range sensor stations at the edge of Council space. 7 human ships had crossed into Council territory. They were not heading back toward Earth. They were heading inward. Heading toward the center of the galaxy. Heading, based on their exact trajectory, directly toward the Eternal Throne. The chamber erupted. Members spoke over each other. Groth's voice made the walls shake. Asa's light went sharp and cold. A dozen security proposals were shouted across the table at once. It was the first time in 300 years that the Eternal Throne had felt anything like panic. And the sound of it echoed through the great metal corridors of the station like something alive. Veldran raised his hand. The room went quiet. "Send the defensive fleet," he said, "and prepare evacuation transports for non-essential personnel." "Evacuation?" Groth said, and the word came out as if it tasted wrong in his mouth. "We are the Council. We do not evacuate. We have 40 ships at Earth that are engaged and cannot be recalled quickly," Veldran said. We have 7 human ships heading here at high speed with unknown weapons loads, and a crew that we know does not care about its own survival when it has a target in front of it." He looked around the room. "We prepare. That is all." The defensive fleet went out to intercept. 16 ships, fast and well-armed, moved to cut off the approaching human group before it could get close to the station. On paper, it was not even a contest. 16 against 7, with better weapons on the Council side. But the 7 human ships did not fight the way any enemy the Council had ever faced had fought before. They split the moment they saw the defensive fleet on sensors. Not a clean split. A wild, unpredictable scatter in 7 different directions at once, each ship moving on its own path, all of them cutting speed and then accelerating in sharp random bursts that made precise targeting almost impossible. The Council fleet locked on, fired. He hit 2 of the 7. Both hit ships kept flying. One was clearly damaged. It did not slow down. What happened next was recorded by every sensor on the defensive fleet and reviewed many times afterward by officers who could not quite believe what they were seeing. The 7 human ships, rather than trying to destroy the Council fleet, flew through it. Not around it. Through it. At maximum speed, weaving and firing and absorbing hits. They went through the center of the defensive formation like water through cracks in stone. 3 more were hit. 2 of those were very badly damaged and fell out of formation. But 2 ships came out the other side, still moving, still intact, still heading directly for the Eternal Throne. The station's own weapons opened up. One of the 2 remaining human ships was hit hard and stopped, drifting, dead in space. The last human ship took 2 direct hits that should have destroyed it. It kept flying. It was on fire in 3 sections. Its hull was cracked. Its speed had dropped by a third. It did not stop. It docked at the Eternal Throne, not at a docking port. The ship drove directly into the lower hull of the station, cutting through 2 outer walls and stopping deep inside the maintenance levels. The crew came out of the wreckage armed, and they moved through the lower corridors of the great station with the quiet, a methodical focus of people who had memorized the layout before they ever left Earth. They were 12 soldiers. They were not there to destroy the station. They were there to do something far more unsettling. They placed transmitters, small, simple devices, in 6 different locations across the maintenance levels of the Eternal Throne. Each one contained the same broadcast, recorded in the Council's own language, which the humans had spent years learning from the drone data. And the broadcast said, "We know where you are, we know who you are. You watched us in silence for 60 years and then sent a fleet to destroy us without a word of warning and without a reason we ever gave you. We did not start this. You did. We want you to know that we remember that. We will always remember that, and we are coming." Then the 12 soldiers fought their way back to their broken ship. 4 of them did not make it. And the 8 who did managed to seal themselves in a section of the ship that still held air and waited. They were taken prisoner 2 hours later. The Eternal Throne had never held human prisoners before. The council gathered that evening in an emergency session. Nobody sat down. They stood around the table and looked at each other in a way that none of them had ever looked at each other before. Not with fear, exactly. The council did not fear easily, but with something close to it, on a cold and deeply uncomfortable feeling of uncertainty that none of them had ever expected to feel about a species they had laughed at in this very room not so long ago. Veldran looked at Auri's empty chair for a long moment. He thought about the papers she had left. He thought about the 60 years of reports he had ignored. He thought about the word she had used once in this chamber, a human word she had translated for them. Relentless. He understood it now in a way he had not before. It was not just about not giving up. It was about something deeper than that. It was about a species that turned every loss into a lesson, every wound into armor, every reason to quit into a reason to keep going. It was about creatures who had been born into a hard world and had decided, somewhere deep in their history, that the universe did not get to tell them when to stop. "They will send more ships," Groth said. His voice was quieter than usual. "Yes," Veldran said. "We have a larger fleet, stronger weapons, better technology." "Yes," Veldran said again. "We have all of that." He did not say what he was thinking. He was thinking about a frozen moon and 300 humans who had survived 60 years alone in the dark and come out harder. He was thinking about 12 soldiers who had driven a broken, burning ship into the side of the most powerful station in the galaxy just to leave a message. And he was thinking that the council had started something it did not fully understand, against something it did not fully understand, and that there was no easy way to finish it. Outside the great station, in the deep dark between the stars, more human ships were already moving, not toward Earth, not home, forward, deeper into council space. More of them every week, following the trail that the 12 soldiers had blazed. Some were warships, some were scout ships, and some were carrying scientists and analysts and engineers, people who wanted to map council space down to the last kilometer. They moved carefully and quietly and without stopping. They were looking for every council planet, every council station, every council member, every council ally. They were building a map, they were building a list. And somewhere out in the dark, on a quiet, forgotten moon, when Auri sat in her small shelter and listened to the transmissions moving back and forth across the galaxy. She had built a receiver that could pick up both sides, human signals and council signals both. She heard the panic in the council channels. She heard the calm in the human ones. She turned off the receiver and sat in the silence for a while. She had tried to warn them. She had tried many times, in many ways, with all the data and patience she had. They had laughed at her. And they had laughed at the little blue planet and the soft, small creatures on it and the very idea that such things could ever matter. The universe had a way of answering laughter like that. The hunt had begun. It would not end quickly. It would not end easily. It would not end at all, perhaps, because that was the nature of the thing the council had made an enemy of. They did not tire. They did not forget. They did not stop. Somewhere far away on Earth, Magyara Chen looked out a window at the night sky, at the stars that were no longer just beautiful but full of meaning and danger and possibility, and she felt something she could not quite name. Not quite pride. Not quite fear. Something older than both. A sense that the universe had just gotten much, much larger, and that humanity was only getting started.